So my story today, I know some of you have been talking about your allergies right now. At this time of year, they do seem to spike. And so I have a story about bees. I don't know if any of you are allergic to bees, but I am allergic to every kind of bee there is. So I'm going to tell you the first time I was stung when I had a reaction. So growing up, I had been stung a few times, but when I was in high school, I was on the swim team, and in San Diego, we have outdoor pools. So I was in my last event of the day, and the last event was always relay race. Okay, so I was the last swimmer in my race, and I was waiting for my girlfriend to swim into the wall, touch the wall, basically tag, and then I jumped off the block into the water. And in the process of diving, I should say, into the water, a bee, a big bumblebee, the big fat ones, came down and stung me on my lower back. And I can be competitive and determined and all that, so it was only a sprint down to the end and back. So I thought, well, I just got stung by a bee, but I'm going to finish my race. And so I sprinted down and I swam back. And the second I was done with my race, I pulled myself up onto the block. And I remember saying to my girlfriend, Rusty, I got stung by a bee. It's in my lower back. It's right here. Will you pull out the stinger? And she's like, yeah, sure. So she pulls it out. I'm like, thanks. And then we just kind of, start walking around doing our thing. Well, within about 5 minutes, I started to feel this pressure on my chest. And what it was is my airwaves were closing up, and it started to get tighter and tighter. And I remember thinking, my breathing feels weird, but I didn't think anything of it because I had never gone through anaphylactic shock before. I didn't even know what it was. And at that point in my life, I probably couldn't even say the word, okay? So eventually, my breathing is getting tighter, and I started to get welts on my neck, and then my face expanded and it started to turn blue and purple. And the worst part was I had this itch from the inside out, and it was just this intense itch. And I've always said, I can take pain, but I cannot take itch. And so my friends are starting to look at me and they're like, Carrie, what's going on? What's wrong? And I'm like, I don't know. I feel a little weird, but I couldn't see myself, so I had no idea. And I also had this attitude that I was invincible and, I'm fine. Well, eventually my teacher looks at me and she says, Carrie, where's your dad? I said, well, when I got out of the water, I told him I got stung by a bee. So he decided to go to 7-Eleven and get some baking soda, because you know how you make the baking soda paste and then you put it on your sting and it pulls the sting out. So he's off to 7-Eleven. She's like, well, I'm taking you to the emergency room. So we were walking out to the parking lot, and right then my dad drove up, and he took one look at me and she said, you need to get her to the ER right now. So I jumped into the truck, and I remember telling him, Dad, blast the AC, because my head was so itchy and I was just putting it up against the vent. I'm like, ah. And so we get to the emergency room and they hook the IV up to me. And I remember I was there for quite a few hours that night, just getting monitored, but everything worked out. I was fine. So the next day at school, I'm walking down the hallway and I see my swim coach, and he looks at me, he kind of smiles. He's like, did you know that you PR'd in that race yesterday? And PR, for those of you who don't know, it's personal record. So it was my fastest 50 sprint ever. And I looked at him, I said, well, maybe I need to get stung by a bee more often. Just a joke, right? So there you go. That was the worst reaction, the first and the worst I've ever had. I've had a lot more stings since, but now I have to carry an EpiPen with me everywhere I go. So how's that?